Hey, sports fans, put that NHL finals game on mute. You're not going to want to miss the upcoming episode of Commanders Gridiron tonight. We got lots to talk about, as always. There's never any shortage. Lots of news coming out in the last 36 hours involving our beloved Washington Commanders. So grab a snack, grab your favorite beverage. Welcome back in 60 seconds. Hey, good evening. Welcome to Commanders Gridiron. I'm your host, Steve Lockman, where we talk all things on and off the field about our beloved Washington Commanders. And as I alluded to in the preview tonight, we had a bunch of news break out in the last 36 hours, and it just makes it that much juicier for tonight's episode. So if you're a new listener, thanks for tuning in tonight. If you're a returning visitor, thanks as well. It's always great. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at the hashtag there, Commanders Gridiron for short, Gridiron. Give us a like, give us a follow. Check out the daily media that's posted there throughout the day. You can also follow us on Facebook as well. And we'll be streaming through Facebook and Twitter coming up here shortly through the Out of the Box Sports platform. So, as before we waste any more time, we're going to jump right into it. And the first thing, and you'll see the topics scrolling across the bottom of your screen so you can see where we are in tonight's pecking order for topics. So just watch the little ticker, watch it scroll, and you can kind of follow along and see what we're talking about. And first, we're going to start off with the new TV deal. So earlier on June 4th, it was announced to the Washington Commanders that they secured a CBS affiliate, USA 9, out of DC to have the exclusive television broadcast partnership. That's going to include, the increased coverage of the team through the two USA-produced shows, which is usually like a pregame, postgame show, and then usually like a weekly talk show-ish, sometimes involving the head coach, coordinators, maybe even a player appearance or two. Which also will include 3 Commanders produced shows as well. The agreement also gives the station exclusive rights to broadcast the team's non-national preseason games, of which there's 3. So it's kind of significant in a way. To some extent, we're not going to waste a whole lot of time on it. Up until this point, the last 2 years exclusively, there was no exclusive TV deal per se with a DC area network. They've always had their flagship radio station. The last couple years, it was 106.7 The Fan. Last year, it switched over to 100.3 or Big 100.3. Doing a tremendous job with those guys and gals. I had the privilege to meet them at an event last year while they were broadcasting live with Coach Rivera's radio show. Hopefully they continue that bi-weekly event with Coach Quinn this season. So, just getting them some more media exposure, more exclusive rights to broadcasting and streaming and stuff like that. So, while I'm in the DC market, it'll be great because every game will be on USA 9, especially when I'm at work on Sundays. However, when I'm at home, here in Pennsylvania, I won't have that access. So I'm just going to have to find, the other ways of streaming to get my Commanders fix to help fill the weekly show here at Commanders Gridiron. As Paul says, does this black out any games in the DC district as the NFL seems to want more revenue throughout the league? So typically, as long as the way I understand it, it will not black out any games in the district with the exclusive rights, even more so that when they play on Thursday night and Sunday night, there are only 2 games, actually Monday night and Thursday night, there are only 2 primetime games of the season. One being out of market, one being at home. They'll still be able to show those as well. So as long as you're in the district or in the district viewing area, within reception of USA 9, the CBS affiliate, you'll be able to catch that game. Otherwise, you're going to have to get creative. YouTube, Sunday Ticket, maybe something else, jailbreak a stick, come up with some other streaming way. Watch it, somebody broadcasting it through their phones at the stadium, or all the crazy stuff that they come up with. So enough about the TV deal. The next one actually broke at about 4:00 this afternoon, so we're going to bring it to you hot off the press. But the Virginia Attorney General's office was pleased to announce that the investigation between his office in the state of Virginia, as well as the Washington Commanders, came to a settlement of $1.3 million. What this settlement and basically this investigation / settlement that accumulated with that settlement came from the previous regime and ownership group under Dan Snyder. It was always well talked about or publicized. I think back as far as like 2015-ish. Don't quote me on that. That prior ownership unlawfully kept security deposits for years after they should have been returned to season ticket holders that were no longer season ticket holders. And there's a lot of accusations, and what led to the Attorney General's office in the state of Virginia doing a full-fledged investigation. And of course, with the new ownership group, Josh Harris, Magic Johnson, Mitchell Rales, and so on, they are more than happy to cooperate, kind of figure out, if any transgressions were done and how to rectify and, provide restitution so that they can move on. And apparently they came up with a figure of $1.3 million. So I'm assuming that, through all the documentation that they have, that'll end up getting split between probably a couple thousand season ticket holders and season ticket holders that were not properly given security deposits that should have been returned are now going to see that money. Does this money come from Snyder's pocket? Unfortunately, Paul, no, it does not. It now comes from the new ownership group. It should rightfully probably come from Snyder, send him the bill. They can't really take back some of the money that they paid for with the team. So, unfortunately, Harrison Company is on the hook. It's only 1.3 million. Seems like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things for them, it's kind of chump change, right? You pay $6 billion for the team, you drop 60, 70 million into the stadium, you drop another, 20 million, 10, 20 million into the practice facility, another $1.5 million to rip up the oldest AstroTurf field in the NFL. So what's another 1.3 million to these cats? So, it kind of is what it is, but it is nice of them to see that they, were cooperative with the Virginia Attorney General's office, making the wrong the right and moving on. So it should make a couple thousand season ticket holders happy going into the summer and early preseason game. Next up, as you kind of see, kind of more off the field stuff for the next 2 or 3 topics here. This came out yesterday. So it's actually interesting because this is something that was kind of been working through the process, but it never really gained traction from a reporting perspective, never hit the NFL insiders, never hit the team insiders radar until I guess probably 2 days ago. And the fact that, Loudoun County, which is where the Redskins are, or where the Commanders are based out of in Ashburn there and Commanders Park, that, once that got approved by the Loudoun County commissioners and zoning staff for this topic that we're going to talk about here in a second, that's when it kind of actually made the news and everybody's like, oh, what? Like, what's going on? So one thing I did learn in reading the article is that apparently Commanders Park in Ashburn is 162-acre parcel development complex, whatever you want to reach out to. So basically the headline that made the news was data center plan filed for Commanders property in Ashburn. So then, of course, everybody and their brother now jumps to the gun, jumps to the conclusions and asks, well, wow, like, are we moving the training complex? Are we going to build something brand new? Is this the, beginning of the end of Ashburn? Are we going somewhere else? Or, are they moving stuff? Going to make a stadium announcement, blah, 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 blah. So, and basically it's kind of not really that at all, right? Which we're going to explain here. So an engineering plan was filed with the county for the property at 21,300 Coach Gibbs Drive in Ashburn, which is Commanders Park. The address matches up to the Commanders property located at the intersection of Loudoun County Parkway and Gloucester Parkway, which, being a fan or a resident of that area, like, you kind of know that area fairly well. The engineering's plan description is as follows. It was a site plan for the 3 data center buildings. For anyone that's kind of familiar with the Dulles Airport area, industrial complexes, so basically like that whole area of Ashburn, Sterling, Herndon, Dulles Airport. If you're not like a housing community, you're not the airport or basically like a hotel, kind of associated with the airport. The only other big items for development in that area, other than some community centers like for grocery stores and like living necessities and needs and stuff, is basically these humongous data centers. And they're kind of like giant warehouses that literally have the 15-20 foot fences all the way around, for so many large electronic IT, Amazon, you name the computer warehouse, or the company, and their data center is probably somewhere in Northern Virginia. So basically, the commanders came out and said, hey, shared a statement that said, we are committed to the Commonwealth. We're committed to Loudoun County, is where many of our coaches, players, and employees not only work, but also call home. Our intention in filing for this approval for the zoning change was to secure the option and flexibility for possible future development of the 162-acre site at Commanders Park. It is not any plan to take action now or in the very near future. Any development we do will be leveraged to reinvest in our football program and fan experience. So it kind of just says, hey, look, this is for something down the road, which is kind of always the given, right? Was that, once they kind of figure out what's going on with the new stadium, then they were really going to address whether or not they were truly going to stay in Ashburn, which is a significant drive, especially on weekends, from kind of that area where a lot of the players live, with their families, etc., to the stadium. So, if the stadium then gets moved into the old RFK project, or, stays out in Landover, the big question was, are they going to stay in Ashburn? So this kind of just gives them a lot of leeway to have multiple options should Ashburn not be Ashburn anymore for the Commanders. So the county went on to say, look, this isn't a surprise to us. We were aware of it coming. Most of DC fans, most of the DC media didn't have a clue. So basically by getting all these approvals, they'll get grandfathered into any kind of zoning for all this stuff. And as we know, when you try to make changes, it's easier to get it done now with, exemptions and grandfathering done than it is later on. So basically, look, they know that the data center and the land for data centers is at a premium in Northern Virginia. So not having those rights secured now versus later impacts that land value and investment, right? So they're just making smart business decisions on behalf of team ownership. So, Loudoun County certainly hopes that the Commanders keep their training facility there in Ashburn for years to come. But, they kind of also know the ramifications, and that, look, it is a business for the NFL, and that team being kind of its own business entity. So we'll see where things go. So next up, after the data centers, it's kind of on the field, off the field. It's kind of off the field because it, happened off the field, but, it does involve a super short-term player. Something that was kind of starting to hit the news during our last episode, but we didn't really have a whole lot of the information. Wasn't really sure if he was going to be kept on the team or released. Was the incident that happened with new kicker, or should say new, now former place kicker, Brandon McManus. And basically, for those of you that don't know, there was a sexual assault allegations by 2 flight attendants against Brandon McManus, who was signed to a 1-year, $3.6 million contract in March. Allegedly, through interviews and media reports, the team didn't know that the allegations were already alleged or accused against Brandon when they signed him in March. So something that, when you think about them signing free agents, any team for that matter, the vetting process that they do, or, what's kind of at their disposal for what may be happening or what didn't happen, or et cetera, et cetera. But basically, the long story short is 2 flight attendants filed a civil lawsuit against 32-year-old kicker out of Florida last month over an incident that occurred on a Jacksonville Jaguars team flight last season, which is who McManus kicked for last season. They were on their way, I think it was either on their way to a game in Europe or on their way back from a game in Europe when the alleged incident happened. After allowing incumbent kicker Joey Slye to depart in free agency to New England, we now have basically like no kicker on our roster until recently. We just signed a UFL guy just to kind of fill the spot until they figure out, get another guy in for competition. But so presumably we're going to either sign a veteran, get a guy from the UFL, maybe an undrafted college kicker, something like that. So it's super interesting. As Paul says, is there any NFL player conduct suspension in the works from good old Mr. Goodell? So I'm not 100% sure yet. I would say at this point in time, no, only because the legal process hasn't finished for him. So, look, we'll keep going first before I give my opinion on the whole story. So, because there's kind of a twist to this, right? So the Commanders conducted an investigation once they found out about the allegation against McManus. And the Commanders conducted that investigation, or whether they simply decided that the distraction outweighs the expected contributions of the kicker, right? So here's the interesting twist. Atlas Air Worldwide, which was the company that flew the Jaguars to London, is actually owned by Apollo Global Management. So for those of you that play along in the investment portfolios of multimillionaires, Apollo was co-founded by Commanders majority owner Josh Harris. So the football team owner actually owns, or founded the Apollo Global Management Air Company that owned the flight that went from that flew the Jaguars to London and back. So it's kind of a twofold, right? So you look at the fact that, there were parties that, made these serious accusations against the kicker. And with this is kind of the two sides of the fence, right? You have a lot of people in DC, fans included, that were like, hey, look, we haven't even had court date yet. We haven't had, trials or any further legal proceedings. We haven't had a settlement. We haven't had, like in the Deshaun Watson cases, nothing. It's basically at the preliminary stages. So, where's the innocent until proven guilty? Unfortunately, in this day and age, especially being a professional athlete, that pretty much gets thrown out the window. You're pretty much guilty until proven innocent. Whether the incident happened or not, it's something that, unfortunately for this team, is probably one of the only teams in the NFL that you couldn't get away with that, especially right now. And what I mean by that is, look, like for everything that has just happened over the last 5 to 10 years under our previous owner, of all the investigations and high profile employees that resigned or will let go or forced to retire, the settlements that we paid out, the investigation after investigation for improper behavior, and the list goes on and on. You can't really expect the Commanders to sit around and wait for the legal process to play out for McManus, right? It kind of sucks for him because that's what you should expect. That's what I would expect, if I was in that position. Why can't I keep my job until the legal process plays out, and then actions taken by my team or the league, which is, I think, it's still gonna still on the table. We all know that, right? The NFL player conduct policy is going to kick in at some point in time once the legal process plays out. So, but then when you throw in the twist of, your football team owner owning the airline that this allegedly happened on, it's just a bad look all around between the history of the team, the intertwines with, the team owner, who's your new owner, literally as like a year and a half ago. It's just not not a good fit, not a good look, and everything else. As Paul chimes in, is that a bad look hire from new owner going back from Snyder ordeal rulings and investigation? Right. So I think had they known that the allegations or the lawsuit was filed when they were looking to sign him, that they wouldn't have signed Brandon to begin with. Um, it was kind of one of those deals where, I'm not sure how they didn't know that that was out there about him, but it kind of just was, right? Hey, Dave. Thanks for checking in. Greatly appreciate it. You can actually catch Dave and Paul on Wednesday nights for them 215 boys, the Dallas Cowboy show here at Out of the Box Sports Network. Joe, who does our Sully squad from the dubious Eagles, Joe says, "Hey, I'm reading great things about Daniels." Yep, you will. We're actually going to be talking about him later on in the show tonight when we go through our OTA segment. You guys are going to surprise. Yep, I think we will. It's kind of going to be that first year surprise, like when RG3 came out in 2014. 2014. Yeah, 2014. So I kind of expect some good things until at least people get some film on him and kind of see what he's about, what he can do, and stuff like that. Hey, Steve, nice to see you. Thanks, Eileen, for checking in. Great to see you too. As always, between our so the last group of people that just checked in are basically all co-hosts of our different shows here at Out of the Box Sports Network, and we all kind of banter with each other back and forth in the group text, but we all kind of chime in and chastise each other on each other's shows as well. So now here we are basically looking at trying to find or fill the kicking void. We did sign a kicker from the UFL. We were hoping to sign Bates as well from the UFL, but he ended up going with Detroit. He's a Michigan boy, or at least he was from Michigan. I don't know if he played any college ball up in Michigan, but he was trying out for like 4 or 5 NFL teams from the UFL. So he ended up going with the Detroit Lions. No shocker there, right? Kind of playing for the hometown. Last but not least of the off the field news for the Washington Commanders, it was reported about a week and a half ago, probably. This is probably one of the older subjects that we got to talk about, that the Commanders are hiring Dylan Thompson from the Houston Texans to be player development role. Basically, the one guy who raved about Dylan Thompson when he was in Houston, you can probably guess, quarterback CJ Stroud, right? So Washington parted ways last month with Malcolm Blacken, who was the previous director of player development. So, it's kind of another, what seems like non-important, role, but in the grand scheme of things, like, hey, your director of player development is pretty big. And, that role is not only to take your incoming class of rookies, but your free agents, even the guys that are currently on your roster, and kind of just working with them on an individual basis, working with them on a position group basis, working with them one-on-one as a position group, offense, defense, whatever, and kind of just helping to elevate everybody for the benefit of not only themselves but the team, right? So it's actually a pretty big role. Nice to see that he does have some success. We know what Houston's been doing for the last 2 years. So as always, just another great hire, right? One thing that's not actually in the subject ticker, only because I forgot about it, but an interesting article came out about Sam Howell. And for those of you that may remember, Sam Howell is basically the starting quarterback for the entire season, except for one game last season for the Washington Commanders. Was traded in the offseason when Adam Peters and Dan Quinn came in. Was traded to the Seattle Seahawks to be the backup to Geno Smith. And it was interesting because gentleman by the name of Dean Jones came out with an article basically as a reflection / highlight of Sam Howell and his performance in the 2023 season. So, it was interesting because Sam took the high road in a lot of regards to what happened, why things happened, why things were the way they were, his performance on and off the field, things that he could do better, things he didn't really succeed in, right? But let's be honest, Howell wasn't put in the easiest situations the easiest of situations anyhow to begin with. So there were some tremendous moments of success for him, most notably during Washington's 2 losses against the Philadelphia Eagles, where we should have basically won both of those games. The one game against the New York Giants that we were winning, but then basically the defense looked like Swiss cheese, gave up a loss there. A couple other games that were basically ours for the taking, but however, some critical flaws emerged basically as the annual football season campaign went on through 2023. Left House future hanging in the balance when Coach Rivera was removed on Black Friday, January 8th, the day of NFL coach firings, which, when new coaching staffs and general managers come in, unfortunately, unless you're basically a star-studded quarterback in the NFL, you're not going to be their guy. So their guy basically is going to get brought in, and then the personnel who are there, especially a quarterback, can either accept the backup role or they're going to be traded. And in this case, unfortunately, Sam Howell was traded to Seattle, right? So when the new general manager was convinced that the quarterback or that the team was going to draft the quarterback at number 2, which we did with JD, the best route to move forward was to trade him because he basically became surplus to the requirements that we needed at quarterback, right? So the interest was high in Howell for being traded. This allowed Peters to extract the maximum value for the signal caller to end a brief yet eventful spell with the organization. So, as Paul says, it's smart that was a quarterback at South Carolina, young quarterback in 2014. He could be an ear for Daniels. Gotcha. Thompson. Aha. Yes. I had to think about that for a second real quick. So Sam Howell basically said, he stepped in the starting role when the time was right. As for the Commanders, hey, look, we believe that JD5 is going to be the superstar quarterback that, the franchise has longed for decades. Hopefully it pans out. We shall see. But when Sam Howell was discussing what went wrong with the Commanders, he took the accountability route based on the comments in the Pro Football Talk article that was written by Dean Dunn. He acknowledged forcing the issue when chasing games proved to be his undoing. The player is also looking to limit turnovers moving forward in pursuit of the progression. So the big quote that kind of comes from Sam Howell out of this article was, I think I could play some smarter ball. I think there were times when we were down big, no shit. In some games, I was a little too aggressive, just trying to make something happen, trying to get us back into the game. The turnovers are just way too high for what I wanted and what the team needed. I think that's definitely something I can take from last year and learn on. So between turnovers, playing catch up in games, as well as basically running for his life and being sacked on every other play, those two things I think kind of collectively were the demise of Sam Howell last season, right? So it's admirable from Howell that he makes that statement for his own accountability and his high character, right? But that said, he's not the only one who needs the shoulder the sense of the blame for what happened in our nation's capital of failure for last year's season. So, look, he was the most sacked quarterback last year in the NFL, and he brought some of that on himself. We all know that, and we saw that, in watching game film or the games week to week. But while he did bring a lot of that on himself, options weren't very available for our offensive line, aside from the standout play of Sam Cosmi and arguably Charles Leno Jr. Basically, those two guys. Other than that, the offensive line sucked. Was Swiss cheese, and Sam Howell was running for his life. Throw into the fact that Eric Bieniemy put too much on Howell. That cannot be disputed, right? We all know that they adopted a pass-heavy offense, ignored the obvious talent of running back between AG and, more importantly, Brian Robinson Jr. to shoulder the load of the offense. It put a significant amount of pressure on Sam Howell in the second-year pro, especially considering his protection wasn't capable, as we just said, of doing the increased pass blocking demands that Eric Bieniemy, was throwing on the offense. Basically, Howell was thrown to the wolves. One could forgive the player for feeling a little let down by those who were entrusted with his development, but he took the high road instead of casting blame and focused on the positives as he tries to rebuild his career in Seattle. So it's interesting that, he does take that accountability, but, he also kind of points some obvious blame at some of his shortcomings in the season. So, even though things didn't work out for Hal's a great dude. I had the opportunity to do 3 autograph signings with him. Personable guy, down to earth, somewhat outgoing after the first one. The first one he was kind of secluded, didn't really say a whole lot. Just gotten to DC. But as we kind of progressed through, the 2 years that he was here, 3 years that he was here, um, it definitely, you know, you could see him kind of evolving not only as an individual but as a player as well. So I think he's going to do fine out in Seattle. He might, depending on how Geno does, and whether or not Geno can stay healthy, Sam might get a legitimate shot at starting a game or two here in the upcoming season for the Seahawks. So wish him the best, and we'll see what happens. Next, we kind of revert to on the field stuff, right? So as you know, we just wrapped up OTAs and mini camps. Basically, the first set was rookie mini camps, rookie OTAs, where a lot of basically it's mandatory for the rookies and all the undrafted free agents that were signed by the team. What was key to note was just the amount, the different vibe, the different feel, the amount of energy that Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt, all the new position coaches brought to rookie mini camps, brought to OTAs, the whole 9 yards, right? It was something that you didn't see the entire tenure of Ron Rivera and company, not even when EB was brought in last year for the offense, right? It's just day and night comparison between the two. And, even though technically it's, as I said, rookie minicamp was for rookies and undrafted free agents, you saw a lot of veterans coming in on their own, optional. Needless to say, to try and get some new work in with some of the rookies, especially with JD5. But, to kind of get a feel for the new playbooks, kind of, whether it's offense, playbooks defensively with Joe Witt, get a feel for, how Dan Quinn's going to be running things. So it was very refreshing and very appeasing to see some of our key players and star veterans reporting a little early to get some of that work in. And, just seeing, the former, I won't say former, but last year's captains, especially, Terry McLaurin, favorite player, and Jonathan Allen kind of doing their thing and leading the team into the new era, the new culture, that's going to be Dan Quinn, right? As some of you may or may not know, for going into this season, wide receiver Terry McLaurin is one of just 6 players that have 1,000-yard seasons in every year since 2020. So while a lot of people don't really see Terry McLaurin as a top wide receiver in the league, mainly because the Commanders have always been at the bottom, the stats kind of show that he's right up there with the best, wide receivers in the league. And, there's nothing but good things coming out of OTA's minicamp, right? The amount of preparation that JD's putting in. Look, Jonathan Allen is known for being one of the guys that comes in, being the first into the facility, last ones to leave. And even he came out multiple times during his pressers and said, look, JD's coming into the building long before I am, and he's staying well past what I do. And it's something that you love to see, right? Terry McLaurin used the following words to describe JD at one of his first pressers during mini camps. He's charismatic, calm demeanor, approachable, prepared, open door communication, talented, humble, and confident. All things that you'd love to see coming out of a rookie quarterback, especially one that won the Heisman last year for LSU. So, JD's doing a lot of the good stuff. Look, JD's not flashy, or hasn't been flashy since he arrived in DC, isn't trying to, promote his brand, isn't trying to, go lavishly spend on a bunch of stuff, isn't trying to, do everything non-football, right? Paul brings up makes a great comment, and we'll dive right into this connection here, right? So Luke McCaffrey is turning heads. I just hate he took number 12. I mean, he did play quarterback at Nebraska before he transferred to Rice. But it's interesting because you bring up Luke McCaffrey, not only because of the McCaffrey connection to CMC, his older brother, and, both the son of Ed, Super Bowl winning wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, but it was also noted that, one of the guys that was joining JD so early in the morning was McCaffrey. And, McCaffrey's obviously, was drafted high, but he's also still trying to make the team for his position group, right? So, it was super nice to see McCaffrey coming in so early in the morning. And basically what we were learning through, the pressers at the end of the day, or the weekly pressers with the players and coaches, was that JD and McCaffrey would come in super early. Some days it would be watching film. Some days it would be, hitting the gym. And a lot of times it was also just running routes and, getting the playbook memorized and progressively working through that together. So it was super interesting to see two of the rookies, offensive rookies, coming in, and getting the work done, trying to get preparation, not making it widely known, hey, look at me. They let the other people note what their work ethic is doing, right? Dan Quinn, one of the many pressers throughout many camps, made mention or reference to the running back combination that he now has, since we signed Austin Eckler from the Los Angeles Chargers, along with, returning running back Brian Robinson Jr., B Rob. And basically he said on the running back tandem of both of them, he's like, look, we got a lot here. They're different. I think what you get across from seeing the two, they're different, but both have really high standards of things they've done. One of the advantages of going through that, let's call it a passing camp for the spring, because that's really what it is, right? Basically, you don't really install any running plays, or you don't have pads, you're not hitting each other, blah 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 blah. But I think Brian has developed into that spot, kind of as also being a receiver back, and to have somebody that's accomplished in the passing game as Austin, you can imagine how you'd benefit from that, right? So Austin has always kind of been both the bruising running back, but also a solid pass catcher out of the backfield. And, so to see Brian this involved in the passing game through this time of the year, that was one of the things that in his workouts that he wanted to do. And you see that come to life having both Austin and B Rob in the same practice during mini camps. Is you're going to see that back and forth. You're going to see that mentoring. You're going to see that leadership from Austin, not only as he's trying to learn the new playbook and system under Kingsbury, but you're going to see that rubbing off on, I'll call him a young veteran, because he has a couple years in the league with B Rob. So it's going to be great. Basically, as I kind of alluded to, JD and McCaffrey would get into the building at 5:45 every morning to do something, whether it's walkthroughs in the bubbles, whether it's watch film, whether it's hitting the gym. It was interesting because people were calling this like, Kobe-esque work ethic and level of work. As Paul says, I think it's the McCaffrey pedigree. His coach at Nebraska said he was one of the first ones, the last one out. And, it probably is, right? It's probably part of that McCaffrey pedigree. He sees the level of detail and attention and work ethic that his older brother CMC puts in every year, whether he was in Carolina or now with San Francisco, as well as, probably stuff that, their old man probably instilled with him as well. So, can't fault any of those guys for that. Basically, one of the things that came out kind of to show you how humble the guy is, even though he's basically, the Heisman winner, college playoffs, the whole 9 yards. Somebody asked Jaden Daniels what it was like to be a star quarterback at minicamp. And I think it was like his second presser of the season, right? Or the off season. And JD responded, he's like, I ain't a star quarterback. I'm a rookie. Um, you know, and basically the DC media is like, hopefully what we're seeing, is reflecting that statement, like he's kind of backing up what he says with his work ethic, right? So, it's great to see how he's conducting himself, how he's taking all this in, how he's absorbing everything from a team perspective, from an NFL perspective, and especially an offensive perspective with Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So for those of you from Out of the Box Sports Entertainment, Now, the X, formerly Twitter viewers, can double click that live video box and then a chat box will appear to comment live. So you can comment live as we drop through on Twitter, and we'll get that through here through that little method right there that was just highlighted up on your screen. We'll take a quick break, talk about our sponsor tonight, which is Mr. Jason Fine, attorney Big Al. You can reach him at 1-800-HURT-123, aka attorney Big Al. Specializes in motor vehicle accidents, slips and falls, workers' compensation, personal injury claim, has 3 convenient office locations throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey, Philadelphia, PA, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Pittsburgh, PA. Remember, if you don't win, he doesn't collect. Always there to help you out with friendly legal advice or to give you a good, solid legal representation. That's Jason Fine, aka attorney Big Al. You can reach him at 1-800-HURT-123. Kind of stepping off from mini camps for a bit. One of the things that, was next up for us, and, we knew going into the season, typically, aside from signing the number 2 player in the draft under JD, that it would take about $9 to $10 million of cap space to sign your rookie class. So I'm happy to report that as of today, before they broke from minicamp, they had their entire 2024 rookie class under contract, which for some teams in the NFL, and especially through the NFL draft, that doesn't happen. Sometimes some of their first rounders will hold out up until training camp or even going into training camp. We had a couple of those last year throughout the league. Sometimes lower round guys will hold out as well. But, hey, look, the Commanders got everybody under contract. Kind of some of the bigger ones to note were kind of the top 3, I should say. Mike Sainristil, who came from Michigan, our cornerback on defense, signed his rookie deal. He's basically the 50th pick of the 2024 NFL draft. He's going to make roughly $7.5 million over the next 4 years. Received a signing bonus of just under $2.5 million. So something that you're going to notice as we go through these next 2, because I just did the top 3, the 2 second-round picks that we did, and then JD, right? We'll talk about JD here in a second. But the Commanders officially signed defensive lineman Johnny Newton to a 4-year, $9.75 million rookie deal that includes a $3.9 million signing bonus. So it's kind of right in line with Sainristil, right? Kind of second round draft pick money, and you'll see why in a second. Then basically we had the Jayden Daniels contract that broke every media outlet in the DC area. Oh my God, holy shit. Jayden Daniels agreed to his rookie contract, being the number 2 overall draft pick this year. Gets a 4-year, $37.75 million deal from the Commanders with $24.3 million signing bonus. So one of the things that kind of, for those of you that don't know, is from the new collective bargaining agreement that was signed, actually the last collective bargaining agreement, because they just redid one like a year ago. Something that got carried over into the new one, the new 10-year deal, was the rookie contract structure. So basically that 4-year rookie contract structure based off of what round you were drafted in kind of lays out the range that you can sign for as a rookie in the NFL, and kind of what your cap hit is going to be. The only thing that is negotiable between you and the team is your signing bonus, and how much or how little that is, how, if it's all up front, if it's deferred, blah, 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 blah. But basically your base pay in your base structure, 4-year deal with the 5th year option is applicable to all rookies from the first to, I think it's 4th round, might be 3rd. And then 5 and 6 is structured a little bit differently, and kind of going from there. But it's basically all laid out in the CBA of the NFLPA agreement as far as what they can sign for, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, the only thing that's different is the signing bonuses. So, it's great to see them all get under contract. Great to see JD get a little money bag. As Paul says, it must be nice to have money to sign your class. We can't pay Lamb and Parsons no shows. Yeah, and I don't envy you guys at all. I mean, I kind of do and I don't, right? So, if we were a lot better team last year and some of our star players had better seasons, then I could definitely see some of our guys being in the position that you guys are in Dallas, right? Um, but one of the things I think Quinn and Peters are going to take advantage of is look, we have JD basically under contract for the next 4 years. So what kind of leaps and bounds with the roster and free agent signings and maybe even a trade here and there can we do to bolster the roster into a playoff contention? I'm not going to say Super Bowl. Let's just say playoff contention team for the next 4 years until we have to hit that 5-year option with JD. Because let's be honest, if JD pans out to be the way he is projected to be, Heisman winning, number 2 overall, blah, 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 blah. 4 years from now, you're going to see Trevor Lawrence money to JD. No doubt about it. If everything works out over the next 4 years. Basically you're going to know in like 2 years, at the end of 2 years, going into 3, if you have a top tiered quarterback in JD, or if we're going to be looking again either through the NFL draft or free agency at the quarterback position. So, kind of stay tuned, right? The next one, look, let's be completely honest. We're going to tell the story here, but Brandon Ayuk, you're going to see the question mark. He's probably one of the most prolific wide receivers in the NFL, especially up there in the top 5, top 10 receivers for stats last season. Arguably behind Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, maybe 1 or 2 other guys, but basically, you're gonna see Brandon Ayuk up there, right? As Paul says, in 10 years, we need to revisit this Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels. Who's better? Absolutely. I think you're going to see quite the battle. And if both of them are given a good opportunity to succeed within their respected organizations, it could be, a decent rivalry between the 2 quarterbacks, not necessarily between the teams because we don't really play them very often, kind of like interdivisional or whatever. But from a stats, from a success, postseason, etc., you could definitely try and draw that lateral comparisons and critique of each other for the next 5-10 years. Absolutely. So look, as we know, Brandon Ayuk has one more deal left on his contract with San Francisco. Star wide receiver, actually got a lot more stats and prominence because of some of the games missed by standout stud Deebo Samuel out in San Francisco. But the reason that this makes news and kind of gets tied to DC is the other day. Let's back up. He's had no contract negotiations with San Francisco and working out a contract extension. He reportedly was seeking somewhere between $27 to $30 million a season for wide receivers, which up until Justin Jefferson signs his deal and a couple other guys, Amon Brown, AJ Brown, blah, 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 signed their deals that was actually really high for the high wide receiver market. But now, as Paul kind of throws there in the middle, Ayuk wants top 5 money. Jefferson, 4 years, 140. Brown, 4 years, 120. Brown with the Eagles, signed his deal. Devontae Smith got his extension before the season, or I'd say at the end of the season, last season, before the wide receiver market kind of started resetting themselves. CeeDee Lamb's going to be in line to get one. There's another wide receiver. I can't think of who it was in the news lately. Tyreek Hill, probably making that big money as well, since Jalen Waddle is getting paid down there in South Beach. So Ayuk, is looking for that contract extension. Still has 1 more year to play under San Fran. But where it gets interesting was Ayuk was FaceTiming, of all people, Jaden Daniels from the Washington Commanders. Not sure what the whole discussion was about, but part of it was, I guess videoed or recorded for whatever reason, kind of looking at the FaceTime. And Ayuk made the comment that San Francisco doesn't want me anymore. Now, San Francisco has kind of come out and played it as, we still want him, we just don't want him at what his asking price is of the 27 to 30 million a season. So, it's kind of, who do you believe, player, team? It's somewhere in the middle, right? Couple things that make this story interesting and the intertwinings is obviously Adam Peters came from San Francisco. So he was there when him and John Lynch drafted Ayuk into the league to San Francisco. Um, that's funny. Paul Spencer's like tampering. Roger Goodell watched this show out of the Box Sports Network. He might be watching, right? Hopefully it's not tampering. Worst case, we only get a hefty fine, $250,000 fine, and we lose a 5th-round draft pick. But whatever. Just like the Falcons did, right? Or maybe they won't find any evidence, even though they tampered. Like even though the Eagles tampered, that they won't find any evidence. Nothing happens. That's a whole different story. But so the connection between Peters and Ayuk is there. It's real. They used to be, part of admin, GM, assistant GM, and Ayuk, right? Guy who drafted him. The other connection is obviously JD. I didn't know this until recently that JD and Ayuk played together at ASU before JD transferred to LSU. And then became the Heisman Trophy winner. So Ayuk and JD have played together before on the collegiate level. So it'll be interesting to see, one of two things. Actually, I guess one of three things. Does San Fran really make a push to give him a contract extension and pay the man? Does Ayuk play out this season on his contract, become a free agent, and then come to DC under, the Peters JD connection? Or does Washington even make a push? Is there a strong enough need to make a push for Ayuk now, which would require a decent little package put together between draft picks and probably even a player to get Ayuk for the upcoming season? I'm not exactly sure where this goes, where it pans out. I would be happy with the wide receiver room we have now. However, if you have the opportunity and can work the contract to be somewhat cap friendly, you don't pass up the opportunity to add Ayuk to your wide receiver room either. So, if you add McLaurin, Ayuk, and Dotson to go with JD going into his first season, and you throw in B-Rob and Eckler in the backfield, and oh, by the way, you throw in old man Zach Ertz, who basically looks like a Zach Ertz of 10, 15 years ago. Right now, it's a pretty stout offense on paper. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens, right? But we'll watch that connection, see if that really flourishes into a contract extension in San Francisco, or if it's just, smoke and mirrors to get him over to DC. Last two topics before we wrap up for tonight is the Commanders announced the preseason games and schedule as it was finalized. And we kind of knew that, hey, look, the Commanders are always high on joint practices, especially in the preseason. So when you looked at the preseason schedule, we knew we were going to do Miami, New England, and the Jets. We didn't know in what order or when. And it's actually announced that they're going to do joint camp practices with both the Jets and the Dolphins before their first two preseason games. So the preseason schedule is going to look like this. Week 1, August 10th, New York Jets at noon. It's going to be that preseason game. Should be some interesting joint practices before that preseason game. They're going to MetLife. They're going to, basically New York, New Jersey. Aaron Rodgers should be in camp. There's guys got a stellar defense up there. So it'll be interesting to see, how kind of we match up against another NFL squad, both offensively and defensively. What we can learn from that, rather than just going against the same guys of your team day in, day out throughout training camp. Week 2 is going to be at Miami, August 17th, which is going to be a night game, 7 p.m., USA 9, the exclusive TV partner that we announced at the very beginning of the show. We'll have joint practices with them, which I think will be very beneficial as well, since, look, they have probably the most high-profile, prolific offense in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, Tua, Waddle, the list goes on and on. They had a couple key losses offensively, defensively, but they also had a really good draft class. Chop Robinson was drafted down there, as well as some, stellar pickups on defense. So it'll be another good test for our guys offensively and defensively, kind of see where we're stacking up, I'm not expecting miracles in the preseason. I'm not expecting miracles in the regular season in the first year under these head coaches, new GM. But you are looking for improvement over the 4 wins that we got last year, right? And then we round out preseason week 3 versus New England. Seems like we always play New England in the preseason. That's going to be August 25th. That'll be a home game, 8 p.m. Basically, the starters won't play. It's going to be to see who makes the 53-man roster, that kind of deal, right? As Paul says, an interesting preseason game: Commanders, Patriots, Daniels versus May. The funny thing is going to be, and I'll be interested to see how training camp goes. I'm going to be interested to see if May even gets the nod as the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. Right now, going through minicamp, he was struggling. It was reported on the media outlets out of New England. I got a couple buddies that are New England fans, kind of keeping me in the loop with that. And basically, May's not taking first team snaps, wasn't taking, first team reps, that kind of deal, was kind of struggling with learning the offense. Some fundamental issues here and there, blah, 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 blah. So it'll be interesting to see if he can progress enough to kind of leapfrog Jacoby Brissett to become the starter in New England this season, or if he's kind of be like a Jordan Love-esque and kind of sit behind Jacoby for half the season, whole season, and then kind of take over in 2025. Because if I'm not mistaken, Jacoby's only on a 1-year deal with New England, maybe 2. It's not more than 2, might even be just a solid 1-year deal. So, as Paul said, hey, look, Jacoby is a solid quarterback. He played in DC last year. If we wouldn't have did the whole ride or die season with Sam Howell last year, I think, we could have got 6-7 wins, 2 or 3 more than what we had last year if we would have started Jacoby in certain games. Because there were a couple games where he came in either at halftime or in the fourth quarter and drove the team right down the field. We scored, next drive did the same thing. And it's like, well, holy shit. Like, you watch Hal in the same system, the same EB system as Hal, but, Jacoby's, being a lot more efficient with it. So as Paul says, 1 year, $8 million. Yep. So, I could honestly see, that new head coach up there in New England kind of holding May kind of as a learning tutelage thing this season, unless either Jacoby gets hurt or they see enough progression that, hey, look, week 7, week 8, we're going to turn the keys over to you. It'll also determine how well the season is going to go for New England. They are arguably in one of the harder divisions in the NFL with the Jets, the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins. But, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that up there and that quarterback situation. But, you could have those 2 guys going against each other in the preseason as well. Last but not least, training camp. Training camp got announced today for the fans. Rookies report on July 18th. The veterans report a couple days later on the 23rd. The one thing that does suck, let's just call it as it is and be honest, there's only 7 days of the training camp right now. I'm kind of hoping they do more. But there's only 7 days that are open to the public. Basically, 5 of them are completely open to the public. 2 of them are season ticket holder days only. So there's basically only 5 days that you have as the public to go to training camp, kind of watch training camp, get that fan experience. I'm very surprised at this one twofold. Last year they sold out and packed training camp every single day, which I feel was like 2 weeks worth solid out of like the 3 weeks or 20 some days of training camp. They had like 2 weeks of it open to the public and they packed every single day. They invested a lot into the facility there for the fans, the fan experience, new stands, food and beverage, memorabilia, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. So for them to kind of backtrack and only go down to 7 days is very surprising. There's 2 days that kind of piqued my interest. They're kind of in the middle. I'm going to try and hit one of the 5. Like I said, there's kind of 2 of them for me. The first day that's available is going to be a zoo, so I'm not going to go to that. The second day available is like the Military Appreciation Day, so that'll be a zoo also. Probably not going to go to that one. The next two are the 2 season ticket holder events. Then the next 2 are probably one of the 2 that I'm going to target, depending on the day of the week. Day of the week, like if it's a weekday, I'll probably target that before a weekend. And then the last day will be the zoo, just because it's the last public day. Got to get your tickets early, got to get your parking early, and you got to show up early. Training camp is going to be in Ashburn again. They're not returning to Richmond, Virginia. So parking will be limited. Tickets will be limited. But it should be a good experience, kind of like what it was last year. So, get an opportunity to go out, see the team before they start the season, before they get preseason games underway, and, maybe snag a couple autographs from new players. Look, I would take it, usually I try to get with a helmet, get it fully signed by whoever comes down the line. But in this case, I'd probably take a helmet to either get DQ on it or take, one piece that I need JD to sign on. And if I get JD to sign it, success. If not, it's kind of the nature of the beast, right? So, we'll kind of see what happens. So, as Paul says, hey, Steve, happy belated Father's Day. Yep, thank you. Happy belated Father's Day to all those guys out there that are in my shoes as well, having a kid or multiple children. It's been a whirlwind of an adventure over the last year. Our daughter just turned 1 at the end of May, last week, May 31st. She's a little crawling monster. Should be walking here shortly. I think it's only a matter of time until she figures out that she doesn't need to hold on to the furniture or me to start moving her 2 feet. So probably by the next episode, maybe, hopefully, she'll be walking on her own, and then I'll really have to watch where she's going and what she's doing. So with that being said, our next episode is going to be in 3 weeks, which should be July 8th, right after the 4th of July holiday weekend. Actually, now as I look at it, July 9th. July 9th will be the next episode of Commander's Gridiron. We'll post that on our social media handles throughout the preview. May even try and do a video preview of topics. And just as a reminder too, as Paul says, I thought Erica said she was going to be a Cowboys fan. I think the only reason that she's not is probably because she grew up in the DC area and her dad was a Redskins fan as well, pre-Commanders era. So that might have been the only thing that saved me. But as I said, next episode is going to be Tuesday, July 9th. So mark your calendars. We'll be back in 3 weeks. With a lot to talk about, hopefully, as we look into training camp getting fired up within the next week after that. Whether or not we sign another kicker, what goes on the field, off the field. And as always, be a friend, tell a friend, like, subscribe, follow Commander's Gridiron on the social media handles, as well as Out of the Box Sports Network. Our network's got a lot of shows for everybody. NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, college football is going to be getting fired up here over the summer. Wrestling, UFC, you name it, we got it. We're also always looking for new shows, new hosts. So if there's a topic or a team that you want to talk about and you want to be like me, where you just sit in front of a computer for an hour every week, we'd love to have you. Start your show, start your platform, start your brand. And as always, take care of each other and have a good night.